The Architectural Control Committee meeting for the Lakeside Meadows Homeowners Association convened, as it always did, in the soulless beige of the community clubhouse conference room. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the low hum of an overtaxed air conditioner. I sat at one end of a long laminate table, a meticulously prepared folder open before me. Across from me, at the head of the table, sat Karen Lawson. Karen was the president of the HOA, a position she wielded not as a civic duty, but as a scepter. Her blonde hair was a marvel of engineering, a helmet of perfect, unmoving waves. Her blazer was a crisp, unforgiving white, and her smile was a thin, bloodless line. To her left and right sat the other two members of the ACC, George Peterson, the treasurer, a perpetually nervous man who looked like he was about to apologize for taking up space, and a woman named Brenda, whose primary contribution was to nod enthusiastically whenever Karen spoke. Next on the agenda, Karen announced, her voice as smooth and sterile as the tabletop, is the application from Mr. Mark Stanton at 112 Willow Creek Lane for a safety fence. She said the word fence as if it were a particularly unpleasant insect. I cleared my throat, feeling the familiar tension of a project manager about to present to a hostile client. Thank you, Karen. As the committee can see from my proposal, this isn't a privacy fence. It's a minimal impact safety barrier, 36 inches high, made of black powder-coated aluminum. It's designed to be as unobtrusive as possible. I passed copies of the proposal down the table. They included architectural drawings, photos of the proposed materials, and even a sightline analysis demonstrating that the fence would not impede any neighbor's view of the lake. I had done my homework. The purpose, I continued, my voice calm and even, is for the safety of my 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Our property abuts the gravel access path, and the new playset we're installing is near the slope. This is purely a preventative measure. Karen picked up the proposal, holding it by the corners as if it were contaminated. She glanced at it for no more than 3 seconds before setting it down. Mr. Stanton, she began, the honorific a tool of condescension. We appreciate your thoroughness. However, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions are quite clear on this matter. She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on a thick, leather-bound volume in front of her. Article 5, Section 5.1.4 states that all exterior modifications must be in keeping with the harmonious architectural and aesthetic design of the community. A fence, any fence, on a property that is not a designated corner lot, represents a significant deviation from that harmonious design. With respect, Karen, I countered, keeping my tone level. The word harmonious is subjective. The design I've proposed is nearly identical to the fencing used around the community pool, which the board itself approved. I'm simply asking for a reasonable accommodation for child safety. Karen's smile tightened. It was a predator's smile. All teeth and no warmth. The pool is a designated common area. Mr. Stanton, the rules are different. Your private lot is subject to a higher aesthetic standard. We cannot set a precedent for caging our beautiful lawns in black metal. It would be visually disruptive. George fidgeted with his pen, his eyes darting between Karen and me. Brenda nodded vigorously. Very disruptive. She echoed. I knew I was beaten. The decision had been made long before I walked into the room. This wasn't a hearing. It was a ritual of denial. The purpose was not to evaluate my request, but to reinforce her authority. So, the request is denied, I asked, my voice flat. The request is denied, Karen confirmed, a flicker of triumph in her cold blue eyes. She made a neat checkmark on her agenda. We can't sacrifice the integrity of our community's aesthetic for one family's anxieties. Now. If there's no further business. I gathered my papers, my hands moving with practiced calm. The anger was a hot knot in my stomach, but I refused to let it show. I had lost the battle, but I had gathered valuable intelligence. Karen Lawson was not a reasonable administrator. She was an autocrat ruling over a tiny, manicured kingdom. And her guiding principle was not harmony, but absolute control. As I walked out into the bright, humid afternoon, I had no idea that this small, bureaucratic defeat was merely the opening skirmish in a war that would threaten to consume my family and my home. Our house on Willow Creek Lane was our sanctuary. We'd bought it 3 years ago, drawn by the quiet streets, the good schools, and the promise of a safe, orderly community. The HOA, with its thick book of rules, had seemed like a feature, not a bug, a guarantee that the neighborhood would remain pristine. We were paying for order. My life runs on order. As a project manager for a large engineering firm, my days are a carefully orchestrated sequence of timelines, budgets, and Gantt charts. I find comfort in systems, in processes that work as intended. My home office is a testament to this: pens, aligned by color, files labeled in a consistent font, a whiteboard covered in neat, logical diagrams. I bring the same methodology to my life. My wife, Sam, is the same, though her approach was forged in a different fire. She spent 8 years in the Army as a logistics officer. She thinks not in charts, but in supply chains and strategic objectives. Her world is one of contingency plans and risk assessments. She can field strip a coffee maker for cleaning, pack a suitcase with terrifying efficiency, and assess a new situation with a calm that borders on unnerving. When we moved in, she didn't just unpack boxes. She established a domestic supply depot in the pantry, with everything labeled and inventoried. Together, we had built a life of predictable, happy rhythms. The sound of our daughter Lily's laughter was the baseline of that life, the constant signal that all was well. At 8 years old, she was a whirlwind of pigtails, scraped knees, and boundless curiosity. She was the reason for all of it: the safe neighborhood, the good schools, the meticulously planned life. She was our primary project, our most important mission. The gravel path that ran behind our house was a source of endless adventure for her. It was a narrow ribbon of crushed stone that connected the backyards of our cul-de-sac, a shortcut for kids walking to each other's houses. It was on that path that Lily spent her afternoons, collecting interesting rocks and staging elaborate tea parties for her dolls. The evening after the ACC meeting, I sat on the back porch, watching her play near the new playset we had just finished assembling. It was a sturdy wooden structure with a slide and 2 swings. A birthday present she adored. The denied fence was meant to create a safe boundary between the playset and the path's gentle but distinct slope. Sam came out and handed me a glass of iced tea. She sat beside me, her eyes following mine to Lily. She denied it. "Didn't she?" Sam asked. It wasn't a question. "Cited harmonious design," I said, taking a sip. "Said it would be visually disruptive." Sam was quiet for a moment. "Disruptive," she repeated, testing the word. Interesting choice. She watched Lily for another moment, then turned to me. "Did you get a copy of the CC&Rs?" I nodded, gesturing to the thick binder on the patio table, the one they gave us when we moved in. "Let me see it," she said. I passed it over. She didn't flip through it randomly. She went straight to the table of contents, her finger tracing down the sections. She read with an unnerving focus, as if she were studying an enemy's field manual. I continued to watch Lily, the low hum of my frustration, a counterpoint to the happy sounds of her play. After a few minutes, Sam tapped a page. "Here," she said. "Article 8, nuisances and prohibited activities. She read aloud in a low, analytical voice. Section 8.4.2. Abusive or harassing behavior. No resident, guest, or invitee shall engage in any abusive or harassing behavior towards another resident, guest, or invitee within any designated common area of the community. She looked up at me. Note the jurisdiction. She said, designated common areas. That's the key. Her power has limits. She just wants us to think it doesn't. I looked at the text. She was right. It was a small detail, a bureaucratic distinction. But it was there. Foreshadowing. Though I didn't know it at the time, I highlighted the sentence with a yellow marker. In the quiet of that evening, with the sun setting over the manicured lawns of Lakeside Meadows, we were just a family trying to keep our daughter safe. We were still playing by the rules, highlighting passages in a book we believed everyone had agreed to honor. We had no idea that, for Karen Lawson, the rules were not a contract to be honored, but a weapon to be aimed. Tuesday. Tuesdays are supposed to be beige, the most unremarkable day of the week. This Tuesday, however, was the day the world tilted on its axis. It started with the sound of Lily laughing, a bright, bubbly sound that carried from 2 houses down where she was playing with her friend. It was the background music that told me everything was right. I was in the garage, trying to diagnose a rattling sound in the lawnmower. When the laughter stopped, it didn't fade. It was severed. A switch flipped, and the silence that followed was heavy and loud. My head snapped up. In the kitchen, Sam, who had been organizing spice jars with military precision, heard it too. She moves with an economy of motion I've always envied. She doesn't rush. She arrives. By the time I dropped my wrench and sprinted to the end of our driveway, Sam was already halfway down the gravel path, her stride long and purposeful. And that's when I saw it, a scene seared into my brain like a brand. Lily was on the ground, a small heap of pink t-shirt and denim shorts. Standing over her were 4 teenagers, their varsity jackets a uniform of casual menace. The biggest one, the leader of the pack, was Tyler Lawson, Karen's son. In his hand, held loosely like an extension of his arm, was a metal baseball bat. He wasn't holding it to play a game. He was holding it like a club. As I watched, frozen for a microsecond, he slammed the bat into the gravel inches from Lily's head. Pebbles sprayed. My heart detonated in my chest. I started running, my legs churning through what felt like wet cement, a primal roar trapped in my throat. But Sam, as always, was faster, calmer, better. She didn't yell. Her voice, when it came, was flat and cold, cutting through the thick afternoon air like a shard of glass. Get away from her! It wasn't a request. It was a command that altered the structure of the scene. The boys flinched, turning. Their smug expressions faltered as they registered the woman closing on them. Sam's posture was pure combat discipline. She was a decision already made. Tyler tried to hold his ground, puffing out his chest. We were just playing. Lady. Sam didn't break stride. She stopped 5 feet away, placing herself between Tyler and Lily. You're done playing, she said. Her eyes locked on his. Drop the bat. He hesitated. Just then, a pristine white luxury SUV pulled up. Karen Lawson stepped out, her face a mask of annoyance, as if we were a traffic jam she had to navigate. Tyler. What's going on here? She asked, her voice a smooth, calculated purr. Tyler mumbled something about Lily tripping. Karen's eyes flicked to the bat, to Lily on the ground, and then to us. She chose to ignore the weapon. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Boys will be boys, after all. Perhaps your daughter is clumsy. Sam stood up slowly. Your son, she said, her voice dangerously calm, stood over my daughter with a baseball bat after his friends pushed her to the ground. There is no misunderstanding. The mask of polite concern on Karen's face vanished, replaced by something hard and cold. I reached them, my breath ragged, a hot, ugly rage building in my chest. I took out my phone. What are you doing? Karen snapped. I'm calling the police, I said, dialing 911. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed into slits of pure fury. That I would dare to involve an authority outside her own was, to her, an unforgivable transgression. 2 police officers arrived 10 minutes later. They were professional, calm, and methodical. They separated everyone and took statements. Lily, now safely in Sam's arms, told them what happened. I corroborated what I had seen. But then the officer spoke to Tyler and his 3 friends, 4 teenagers, all varsity athletes, all telling the exact same story Lily had run between them while they were practicing swings, tripped over her own feet, and fallen. They were just checking to see if she was okay. It was her word against their 4. The senior officer, a man with tired eyes, explained the situation to me and Sam with a sigh. I'm sorry, he said, his voice low. I believe your daughter, but from an evidentiary standpoint, I have conflicting testimony from 4 witnesses against 1. Without independent evidence, a video. Another witness I can't press charges for assault. It becomes a he said, she said situation. And the DA won't touch it. I can file a report. And that's about it. Karen, who had been listening with a triumphant smirk, stepped forward. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on the officer's arm. Thank you, officer, for handling this playground tiff so professionally. I'm sure we can all agree it's been blown completely out of proportion. She was dismissing it, rewriting reality in real time. She was building a wall of plausible deniability around her son, and the law, with its high burden of proof, was handing her the bricks. The police left, and Karen gathered her son and his friends. As she walked back to her SUV, she looked at me. The polite mask was gone. Her eyes were chips of ice, promising retribution. She hadn't just won this battle. She was already planning the next one. And this time, she would be fighting on her own turf, using her own rules. The first volley in Karen's retaliatory campaign arrived exactly 1 week later. It wasn't a fine. Not yet. It was something more insidious. A bureaucratic appetizer. The envelope in our mailbox was crisp and cream-colored. The HOA logo embossed in the corner. It was a courtesy notice. The notice informed us that our new playset, the very reason I had requested the safety fence, was in potential violation of CC&R 5.1.4, harmonious architectural and aesthetic design. The same vague, catch-all clause she had used to deny the fence. The notice stated that the playset's prominent vertical structure and unapproved color palette natural wood tones were visually disruptive to the neighborhood's aesthetic. It requested that we submit a formal architectural application for the playset within 10 days to be considered by the ACC. It was absurd. It was targeted. It was a declaration of war by certified mail. I stood in the kitchen, the letter trembling slightly in my hand. She's citing the playset, I told Sam, my voice tight. The one we just built for Lily. Sam took the letter and read it, her expression unchanging. She walked over to her laptop, which was perpetually open on the kitchen counter, and created a new folder on the desktop. She labeled it, simply, Lawson. Okay, she said, turning back to me. This is the first move. It's a probe. She wants to see how we react, My instinct was to storm over to her house, to yell, to demand she stop this transparent harassment. Sam saw it in my eyes. "No," she said firmly. "Don't get angry. Get evidence. We fight this on her turf, using her rules. But we do it better. We follow the procedure to the letter. We build a record." So, that's what I did. I spent the next 2 hours drafting a polite, professional, and exhaustively detailed email response. As a project manager, I live for documentation. I treated it like a formal project rebuttal. I attached the playset's original brochure, highlighting that it was a standard, popular model sold nationwide. I included a dozen high-resolution photographs of the playset from various angles, demonstrating how it was nestled behind our house and barely visible from the street. I even included a materials list, noting that the unapproved color palette was, in fact, natural cedar, a material explicitly listed as acceptable for decking and other structures in a different section of the bylaws. I cited the relevant clauses from the CC&Rs, making a calm, logical case that the playset fell well within the spirit of the community's standards. I concluded by formally requesting that the courtesy notice be rescinded. I saved a copy of the email and all its attachments into the Lawson folder. Then I hit send. We were playing her game. We were engaging with the process, showing that we were reasonable, rule-abiding homeowners. We were building our paper trail, brick by meticulous brick. We were creating a record of our attempts to resolve this peacefully, a record that would stand in stark contrast to the escalating aggression we knew was coming. The courtesy notice wasn't about a playset. It was about control. It was Karen's way of telling us, "I can touch you whenever I want. I can invent a reason to enter your life and create chaos. Welcome to my world." A week passed in tense silence. Then, the other shoe dropped. It arrived not as an email, but via certified mail, a tactic designed for legal weight and intimidation. I had to sign for it at the door. Inside was a formal notice of violation and fine. My appeal had been rejected. The letter, signed by Karen, stated that the ACC had reviewed my submission and found it non-responsive to the core aesthetic concerns. The playset was officially in violation. The fine was $100. The letter also included, as required by state law, a notice of right to a hearing, informing me that I could appeal the fine in person before the board. The procedural escalation was clear. We had moved from a polite warning to a formal, monetized punishment. The game had changed. "She's not backing down," I said to Sam, laying the letter on the counter. "She's daring us to fight." "Good," Sam replied without looking up from her laptop. "Let's fight. Request the hearing." That night, I felt a deep sense of frustration. We were being pecked to death by a bureaucratic vulture. I walked next door to Bill's house. Bill was a retired Marine, a Vietnam vet who now spent his days in his immaculate garden and workshop. He was quiet and gruff, but he saw everything. He'd given us a grim, knowing nod the day of the incident with Lily. I found him in his garage, sharpening a chisel on a whetstone. The air smelled of sawdust and oil. I laid out the whole story: the bat, the police, the denied fence, and now the escalating notices about the playset. He listened without a word, his focus entirely on the blade in his hands. When I finished, he wiped the chisel on a cloth and inspected the edge. "Karen Lawson," he rumbled, "been running this place like her own private fiefdom for years. Selective enforcement. If you're in her circle, your boat can sit in the driveway for a month. If you're not, you get a fine for a garbage can left out for an extra hour." He paused. "She's not stupid. Mark, she's a bully, but she knows the paperwork. You can't beat her on emotion. You need to beat her on jurisdiction and procedure." He put down the chisel and looked at me, his eyes sharp. "I used to be a county surveyor after I got out of the service. Here's my advice. Jurisdiction is everything. The first thing you do is get the official plat map for our subdivision from the county recorder's office. Don't trust the copy in your HOA welcome packet. Get the real one, the one with the county seal. Find out exactly where the property lines are and what's designated as common area versus private easement. The HOA's power ends at the boundary of the common area." It was the best advice I'd received yet. The next morning, I took Bill's advice. I also sent a formal, written request to the HOA board for copies of the last 12 months of meeting minutes and all current vendor contracts, as was my right as a homeowner under our state's laws. A few days later, I received a thick manila envelope from the HOA. The minutes were there, but as I read through them, I found something strange. In the minutes from the March meeting, under the section titled Vendor Contract Renewals, there was a large, black, redacted box, a solid block of ink hiding a paragraph of text. My project manager's brain lit up. Redactions mean something is being hidden. I cross-referenced the date with the vendor list. The contract renewed in March was for Evergreen Excellence Landscaping, the company that handled all the common area maintenance. The price seemed exorbitant, but without the discussion text, I had no context. I placed the redacted minutes into my growing binder of evidence. I now had two clear objectives, two threads to pull. The first was the plat map, the question of jurisdiction. The second was the black box, the question of what Karen Lawson was so desperate to hide about a simple landscaping contract. I was no longer just defending my family from harassment. I was beginning an investigation. The county recorder of deeds office was a dusty, quiet place that smelled of old paper and history. It was the complete opposite of the HOA's sterile, modern world. Here, the records were not arbitrary rules in a binder, but legally binding documents tied to the very land itself. After a bit of help from a clerk, I located the official plat map for the Lakeside Meadows subdivision. I unrolled the large, heavy paper onto a viewing table. It was a dense web of lines and numbers, the blueprint of our community. I found our cul-de-sac, 112 Willow Creek Lane, and there, running behind our property, was the gravel path. My finger traced the lines defining it. The description printed in tiny, precise letters was unambiguous private access easement for lots 108-114. It was not a designated common area. The legal distinction was monumental. According to the HOA's own CC&Rs, the clause Sam had found, and I had highlighted that first evening, their jurisdiction over resident behavior was explicitly limited to common areas. The incident with Tyler and Lily had occurred on a private access easement. The HOA had no legal authority there. Karen's entire premise for retaliation, the foundation of her campaign against us, was built on a jurisdictional lie. She was abusing her power by acting in a place where she had no power to act. A cold, clean wave of anger and clarity washed over me. This was the cornerstone of my case. Empowered by this discovery, I turned my attention to the redacted minutes. If she was lying about her authority, what else was she lying about? I focused on Evergreen Excellence Landscaping. A quick search of the state's business license database gave me the name of the company's registered owner, David Miller. The name was generic, meaningless. But Sam, with her logistician's mind for tracing connections, took over. She spent an hour online, cross-referencing public records, social media, and property deeds. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Finally, she stopped. "Got it," she said, her voice quiet. She turned her laptop screen towards me. On it was a wedding announcement from a local newspaper's website, dated 8 years prior. The announcement was for the marriage of Ms. Karen Miller to Mr. Alan Lawson. Her maiden name was Miller. Sam clicked another tab. It was a social media profile for a man named David Miller. One of his recent photos was from a family barbecue. In the photo, he had his arm around a smiling Karen Lawson. The caption read, "Great time celebrating the 4th with my big sister and the family." David Miller, the owner of the absurdly expensive landscaping company with the exclusive, non-competitive HOA contract, was Karen Lawson's brother? The redacted minutes weren't hiding a simple discussion. They were hiding a massive conflict of interest and, most likely, a kickback scheme. This changed everything. My fight was no longer just about protecting my daughter from a bully and my family from a vindictive neighbor. It was about exposing systemic financial corruption that was victimizing every single homeowner in our community. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was using the HOA as her personal ATM, funding it with our mandatory fees. The stakes had just been raised exponentially. I was no longer just defending my home. I was attacking her throne. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that she would do anything to protect it. News travels fast in a small community. Even news of quiet, bureaucratic inquiries. Someone on the board, likely the ever-nervous George Peterson, must have mentioned to Karen that I had requested the unredacted financials. Her response was swift, dramatic, and aimed directly at the heart of our financial security. Another certified letter arrived. This one felt heavier, more menacing. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a new violation notice. This one was for unapproved landscape ornamentation, the small ceramic gnome Lily had painted in art class, which was tucked away behind a rosebush. The pettiness was breathtaking. It was a clear message: I am always watching. I can always find something. The second document was the real weapon. It was a formal, legally drafted notice of intent to place a lien on property. The letter stated that due to our failure to remit payment for the accumulated fines, now totaling $250, with the addition of the gnome violation, the HOA was exercising its right under Article 11 of the CC&Rs. If the full amount was not paid within 30 days, the association would place a lien on our property. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. This was no longer about annoying fines. A lien is a legal claim against an asset, a cloud on the title of our home. It would damage our credit rating. It could trigger a review from our mortgage lender. It was a serious, tangible threat to the biggest investment we had ever made. This was how Karen crushed dissent, not with goons in the night, but with the slow, suffocating power of legal and financial strangulation. I handed the letter to Sam. She read it, her jaw tight, for the first time since this began. I saw a flicker of genuine anger in her eyes. She looked from the letter to me. "She's trying to put us on the defensive," Sam said, her voice low and controlled. "She wants us to panic, to pay the fines, to drop the investigation just to make this go away. She's escalating from harassment to direct financial warfare." That night, the pressure was immense. We sat at the kitchen table, the lien notice lying between us like an unexploded bomb. The joy and peace of our home felt contaminated. "Maybe we should just pay it," I said, the words tasting like ash, "just to get her off our backs while we build the rest of the case." Sam shook her head, her resolve hardening. "No, that's what she wants. Paying it is an admission of guilt. It validates her actions. It tells her the tactic works." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. "Don't get angry. Mark, get organized. We have the data. We have the plat map, the proof of harassment, the financial connection. We have everything we need. We just need the right venue, the right moment to deploy it all at once. She looked at the HOA calendar, tacked to the corkboard. Her finger landed on a date 2 weeks away. The annual homeowners meeting. She said, "It's a public forum. Every homeowner will be there. She can't hide in a committee meeting. She can't control the narrative if we present it directly to the people she's stealing from." She was right. A public confrontation was our only move. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. We would have one chance to present our case. If we failed, we'd have a lien on our house. And we'd be marked as the neighborhood troublemakers, isolated and defeated. But if we succeeded, we wouldn't just save ourselves. We would liberate the entire community. The fear was real, but beneath it, a new feeling was taking root, a grim, focused determination. The battle for Willow Creek Lane was heading for its endgame. The community clubhouse was packed, the air buzzing with an energy utterly foreign to a typical HOA meeting. Bill and Claire had done their work, quietly urging every resident who had ever felt the sting of Karen's overreach to attend. The room was standing room only. Karen stood at the podium, beaming. She mistook the crowd for a sign of her own popularity, a testament to her strong leadership. She wore a power red blazer, the architect of a world she believed was entirely under her control. My heart was a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. Sam gave my hand a firm squeeze. "Just stick to the sequence," she whispered. "Present the data. Let it speak for itself." I had signed up for a 5-minute slot in the homeowner forum at the end of the meeting, on a large screen behind the podium. A digital timer was projected, its green numbers currently dark. We sat through the tedious preliminaries, the approval of last month's minutes, a report from the landscaping committee delivered by Brenda, who praised the excellent, cost-effective work of Evergreen Excellence. George Peterson read the treasurer's report from the doctored ledger, his voice a nervous, barely audible monotone. He wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Finally, Karen arrived at the last item. That concludes the board's reports. We now open the floor for the homeowner forum. Each speaker will have 5 minutes. First on the list is Mark Stanton. As I walked to the front, I connected my laptop to the projector. Karen's smile was a tight, condescending line. "Mark, I hope this isn't about your playset again. That matter is closed." I ignored her, addressing the room. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Stanton from 112 Willow Creek Lane. I'd like to present a timeline of events that should concern every homeowner here." The timer on the screen clicked on Oro 5, Row 0. On August 2nd, I began, my voice steady. My 8-year-old daughter was threatened on the access path behind our home by the president's son and his friends. A police report was filed. An image of the police report's cover sheet appeared on the screen. Karen's face hardened. 2 days later, on August 4th, my family received our first ever notice of violation from the HOA. The courtesy notice about the playset appeared on screen. Over the next 5 weeks, we received a total of 4 violation notices and an intent to place a lien on our home. A rapid-fire slideshow flashed each notice onto the screen, the dates prominently displayed. This is a clear, documented pattern of targeted harassment, beginning immediately after we involved law enforcement in an incident concerning the board president's son. The timer read Yo 3:45. The room was dead silent. This harassment, however, is based on a fundamental falsehood. I projected 2 documents side by side. On the left was the official, sealed county plat map. On the right was a highlighted excerpt from our own CC&Rs. Article 8.4.2. No resident shall engage in any abusive or harassing behavior within any designated common area. As the county's legal plat map shows, The path where the incident occurred is a private access easement, not a common area, according to its own governing documents. This HOA has absolutely no jurisdiction there. Every action taken against my family since that day has been an illegal overreach of authority. The timer read 02:10. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen was on her feet. "This is out of order. Your 5 minutes are—" "I have 2 minutes left," I said firmly, not looking at her. My eyes were on George Peterson. "This raises a question," I continued, my voice resonating through the quiet room. "If the board's president is willing to fabricate jurisdiction to pursue a personal vendetta, what else is she willing to do? For example, what is she hiding in the association's financial records?" The image of the March meeting minutes, with the large black redaction box over the landscaping contract, filled the screen. I requested the unredacted minutes and was denied. I'm sure many of you have wondered why our landscaping fees are so high. I did some research. The contract was awarded in a non-competitive bid to a company called Evergreen Excellence, which is owned by the president's brother. A collective gasp went through the room. Karen's face was white with rage. Lies, slander. I paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. This was the moment. The moral dilemma Claire had presented me with: do I destroy George to get to Karen? I had chosen a different path. I looked directly at George Peterson, the treasurer. My voice softened. But I don't have to be the one to prove it. The truth should come from someone who has seen it firsthand, someone who has been forced to sign the checks, someone who knows what's right. The timer read, "Wow, 0:45. Every eye in the room swiveled to George. He was trembling, his face ashen. Karen shot him a look of pure venom, for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. He said nothing. Then, slowly, shakily, he pushed his chair back and stood up. "He's right," George said, his voice cracking but clear. "She made me do it. The bids were faked. The invoices are inflated. I have the real ledger." He held up a flash drive. "It's all on here. Kickbacks, embezzlement. It's all there." The timer read 20:10. I clicked to my final slide. It was a simple flowchart Sam had made, showing money from the HOA account flowing to Evergreen Excellence, and from there to a shell corporation registered to Karen Lawson. "The evidence is clear," I said as the timer hit 0. "It's time for a change." The room erupted. It wasn't chaos. It was a focused, collective roar of indignation. All the years of petty fines, of arrogant dismissals, of feeling powerless, it all came pouring out. Karen Lawson stood at the podium, speechless, her face a mask of stunned disbelief. The illusion of her authority had been shattered, and her power evaporated in real time. Bill, the retired surveyor, was the first to act. He stood, his voice cutting through the noise like a drill sergeant's. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in the president." Karen Lawson. Second, yelled a woman from the back. One of the other homeowners Claire had told us about. A woman who had been fined for the color of her welcome mat. "All in favor," Bill shouted. A forest of hands shot up. Nearly every person in the room. All opposed. Karen and Brenda were the only two to raise their hands. "The motion carries," Bill declared, his voice ringing with finality. Before Karen could even process her removal, Claire stood up. "I move for an immediate, independent forensic audit of all association financials for the past 7 years, to be conducted by an outside firm approved by the homeowners here tonight." Second came a chorus of voices. The vote was, again, nearly unanimous. The remaining board members on the stage, the ones who had enabled Karen through their silence, looked terrified. They saw the personal liability hurtling toward them, one by one. They began to distance themselves. Brenda, Karen's loyal sycophant, raised a trembling hand. I think we should turn Mr. Peterson's evidence over to the authorities immediately. George, emboldened, walked to the podium and placed the flash drive on it. I'll cooperate fully. Karen Lawson was no longer the queen of Lakeside Meadows. She was just a woman in a red blazer, surrounded by the angry faces of the people she had cheated and bullied. Her kingdom had crumbled, not with a bang, but with a series of procedural motions, carried out by the very people she had underestimated. She stared at me, her eyes filled with a new and unfamiliar emotion: fear. The security of her manicured world had been irrevocably breached. She gathered her purse and, without another word, pushed her way through the silent, parting crowd and fled the room. The timer on the screen behind the empty podium still glowed, its task complete. In the weeks that followed, a quiet revolution transformed Lakeside Meadows. An interim board was formed, with a reluctant but resolute Bill at its head and Claire as secretary. The first official act of the new board was to unanimously pass a motion voiding all fines and legal actions initiated against my family. The lien, which had never been formally filed, was dead on arrival. The forensic audit revealed the full extent of Karen's corruption. The numbers were staggering. She had siphoned over $200,000 from the community's funds over 5 years. Armed with the audit and George's testimony, the new board turned the entire case over to the state's attorney general. Indictments for felony fraud and embezzlement followed swiftly. At the next homeowners' meeting, a well-attended, surprisingly civil affair, I proposed a new bylaw. It required a minimum of 3 competitive bids for any contract exceeding $1,000, with all bids to be publicly posted on the community website for homeowner review. It passed unanimously. The era of secret deals was over. Life returned to a new, better normal. The tone of the neighborhood shifted from one of quiet anxiety to one of open community. People started talking to each other again. Lily's laughter once more filled the space around the gravel path, a sound no longer tinged with fear. Several months later, the neighborhood held its annual summer block party. Grills were fired up, kids ran through sprinklers, and, for the first time, it felt like a genuine celebration. I was flipping burgers when one of my newer neighbors, a guy named Dave who worked at the same large engineering firm as I did, came over to grab a beer. We chatted about work, and he mentioned he'd been with the company for over a decade. You know, he said, taking a sip of his beer. It's funny. I used to work with Alan Lawson, Karen Lawson's husband. My attention sharpened. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this was years ago, before he left. Dave continued, oblivious to the bombshell he was about to drop. He was a senior manager, a real company man. He was the absolute shoo-in for the department head promotion back in 2018. Everyone knew it was his. Then, you transferred in from the Chicago office. Mark, the board loved your proposal for restructuring the logistics division, and they gave the job to you instead. Man, Alan was furious. Never seen him so angry. Complained for weeks that he'd been cheated. He quit a month later, and they moved out here, not long after. I stood there, spatula in hand, the smoke from the grill curling around me. It all clicked into place. Every passive-aggressive comment, every arbitrary denial, the sheer, obsessive vindictiveness of her campaign against my family. It wasn't just about her son. It wasn't just about protecting her financial scheme. This had started 5 years ago, in a corporate boardroom I barely remembered, with a promotion I had earned. Her relentless war on my family was rooted in a deep, personal, long-simmering grudge over her husband's perceived failure, our arrival in her neighborhood, Her little kingdom, where she finally had the power she felt her family deserved, had been an intolerable intrusion of her past. I looked over at my wife, who was laughing with Claire, and at my daughter, who was in a fierce water gun battle with the other kids. We hadn't just stumbled into a fight with a corrupt HOA president. We had unknowingly moved onto the battlefield of a war that had been declared on me years before I ever knew it existed. And we had won.